his first day in office as president of the United States, he managed to erase females and our sex-based rights. And of course, you know, Twitter got Biden erased women trending. I mean, who's surprised? Not me. And also, not surprisingly, it was trending because of annoyed leftist feminists, but also people on the right of both sexes saying that I told you so, basically. I mean, I told you so. I told you he was a dick. Abigail Shrier, the author of Irreversible Damage, which I've talked about that in a previous video, said a new glass ceiling was just placed over women or girls. She said on Twitter, on day one, Biden unilaterally eviscerates women's sports. Any educational institution that receives federal funding must admit biologically male athletes to women's teams, women's scholarships, etc. A new glass ceiling has just been placed over girls. And where would we be on this topic without the woke mob coming for us on Twitter or anywhere else that they can possibly come for us? Twitter headline says, people are defending President Biden's recent executive order aimed at combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation, calling criticism of the mandate transphobic. Like, I haven't heard this 100 times before, actually, like a million times. Arguing against the notion that it erases rights of cisgender or biological women. You already know how I feel about this. But for people that are new to this channel, I am pro-trans rights, but not at the expense of biological females. It's really that simple. So what does this executive order actually say? We're gonna read this together, okay? This is from the White House website. For those of you who think that I'm like making this up, I am not. You can go on the website and look at it for yourself. Executive order, it says, on preventing and combating discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation. Okay, section 1 policy. Every person should be treated with respect and dignity and should be able to live without fear, no matter who they are or who they love. First sentence is great. Pretty sure that every single person on earth of at least a sane mind believes this, at least hopefully in 2021. Children should be able to learn without worrying about whether they will be denied access to the restroom, the locker room, or school sports. Second sentence, people might have an issue with this. I also agree with because it's about children. When I think of children, I think of people under the age of like 10, 12 years old. Adults should be able to earn a living, pursue a vocation, knowing that they will not be fired, demoted, or mistreated because of who they go home with or because of how they dress if it does not conform to sex-based stereotypes. Still on your side here, Biden, but I know this is gonna get messy though, because a lot of people were sending me this to cover. And I'm not a fan of being one of those people that say I told you so, but you know what? Told you so. People should be able to access healthcare and secure a roof over their heads without being subjected to sex discrimination. This is where a lot of people had problems with this, and I will too. All persons should receive equal treatment under the law, no matter their gender identity or sexual orientation. Okay, this is why this doesn't work. And it seems very nice. Like when you read it straight up, it seems nice. The thing is, it's too vague. It's incredibly vague. Gender identity in general is a very vague, messy term at the moment. And if we're gonna be real, which I usually am on this channel, actually I always am, simply identifying as a different gender is very different than making physical and biological changes and even social changes, transitioning in some way.
Initially, when I heard about this executive order, I immediately thought to myself, this is going to get ugly. And while I understand that it may be upsetting to know that so many people oppose this order, I think it's important to understand why people oppose it rather than automatically labeling someone as transphobic. First and foremost, there's the matter of sexual assault. I think it's very naive to not consider the possibility of bad people hiding in plain sight. What's to stop a person from identifying as the opposite gender solely because they want to follow their victim into the bathroom? The same thing can be said about rape shelters or prisons, for example, and it's not transphobic to consider how this order could be abused by the wrong people. The other thing to understand is gender identity is a specific ideology. Only some people believe it. Is it wrong for someone to feel scared or uncomfortable sharing a locker room with someone that visibly appears to be the opposite gender? I don't think so. My point is that I find it hypocritical to enact an order for human rights without considering the rights of other human beings. You're appeasing one group of people while effectively upsetting another. Perhaps there's a middle ground that can be taken to make most people happy. The option for community locker rooms. Perhaps a trans sporting division. I know that some folks will get snarky with me at the fact that I would even suggest such a thing, but the reality is that forcing a bunch of people to simply get over it and adopt an ideology they don't believe is inevitably going to create more tension and resentment towards the LGBT. And if that's not the goal, perhaps it's best to consider every detail before enacting an order like this. Plus, who the hell wants to take a shit in public anyway? I mean, seriously, have you seen the Walmart bathrooms? Ew.
You can't have sex-based rights and gender identity rights in the same realm. You just can't do it. I'll give you a good example. Let's say a trans woman who's been on HRT for like a year or isn't on HRT at all. Their gender identity is woman under the new executive order, right? They will still be legally allowed to play in female sports. If refused, this trans woman would be able to sue the Board of Education, whoever isn't allowing that person, that trans woman, to play in the sport with the people that she identifies with as far as gender. Even though this study literally just came out stating that even after a year on HRT, trans women still hold significant advantages over biological women as far as strength is concerned. Of course, we're talking about sports. I'll also include that link in the description below for you guys so you can read the study yourself. And of course, some sports organizations took note of this study and thus banned trans women from playing in biological women's sports, or dramatically changed the rules which would allow them to compete. And nobody is surprised that a trans woman is now suing the USA Powerlifting for banning trans women from competing. I'll put that link in the description below also for you guys. So now, if we go on gender identity like the Biden order states, the trans women who are not on HRT, who never planned to be on HRT, who haven't even socially transitioned, and yes, there are a few like that, don't tell me they're not, they will also be allowed to compete. They will also be allowed legally to enter any women's spaces, whatever they deem fit, because identity trumps all, no pun intended. We miss him. And besides sports, there are so many ways that this could go wrong.
I don't think it's wrong to acknowledge the physical advantages that trans women can have over biological women. Sure, in the context of a sport such as golf, for example, these differences may not matter all that much. But if we were to consider something like UFC or boxing, on the other hand, that's a different story. Of course, there's the argument of intersex athletes who can't help the fact that they were born that way, but some could say that transitioning, on the other hand, is something that technically can be controlled. That being said, is it fair that trans women feel excluded from sports? No, I think everyone should be allowed to compete in some way. But is it uncalled for to acknowledge why biological female athletes might feel they're at a disadvantage? Not at all. And by the way, the same thing goes for trans men. I wonder how the unwritten rule of never hit a woman would fare in the context of boxing someone that transitioned from female to male. The other question that I have is, what would the rules on performance-enhancing drugs look like? If someone self-identifies but never plans on undergoing hormone replacement therapy, would there be flexibility on performance-enhancing drugs? If the answer is no, then would that truly be a
Now, I don't like making a video where I don't at least have some idea of how to address the issue proposed. I think the best way to make this as fair as possible is to think of the reasons why the sexes or people in general are separated in the first place. Is it a biological reason? Is it a social reason? Sports, why are they segregated? Is it a social reason or is it a biological reason? Clearly it's a biological reason because males are generally much more stronger than females. It would be dangerous for most females to compete against males. Like, it's that simple, really. And I say most because it is most. Many times separation is for biological reasons because it is for safety reasons, like in sports, like in prisons. I think Blair actually talked about this the best in her video about it. Now, if we're talking about social separations, in most cases, and if not all cases, to be honest, because I really don't care, trans women and trans men should be with biological men and biological women. Most, if not all, I think social separations are solely based on gender stereotypes, gender expression, basically gender conformity. You have to act, think, dress, be a certain way if you are said sex, which is understandable because a lot of it does come from biological, factors, but at the same time, it's social. It shouldn't be an issue. Social has nothing to do with safety. Social has all to do with culture. Now, my advice to Biden and his administration, because girl, y'all need it. If you are in a situation where you have to come up with a new executive order or a law in regards to trans rights, gender identity versus sex-based rights, do the biological versus social thing. Are we separating people because of biology, which means safety, or are we separating people because of social or cultural reasons? Make your decision from there. I feel like at this point it's that simple and it does its best at playing both sides as fairly as possible. Let me know what you guys think in the comments and make sure you go and check out my friend Vanessa Gothics. I'll have her link in the description below, as well as the articles that were referenced in this. I will see you guys back here in a few days with a brand new video. Until then, I love you, love yourselves. Be sure to subscribe if you aren't already. Bye!